And we just he started singing, and I started doing the harmony, or I started singing and he did the harmony. Yeah. And we just said, hey, well, let's...
One of whom is my guest this morning, Conway Twitty, a man with an unusual name and an unusual talent. He appeared here with Loretta Lynn.
Country music's biggest stars is dead tonight. Conway Twitty collapsed this morning in Missouri and died a short time later.
I have so many memories of Conway. Conway is one of the greatest singers.
Before Conway Twitty took his final breath, he revealed a truth about Loretta Lynn that stunned even those closest to him. For decades, fans whispered the same question. Were they just duet partners? Or was there something deeper hidden behind the lyrics, the chemistry, and the way they looked at each other on stage? Their voices melted together like no other duo in country music history. Their bond was so powerful that millions believed it couldn't possibly be just friendship. But when fate brought Conway and Loretta together in the most shocking way on the day of his passing, the truth he left behind finally gave an answer. One that changed how fans would forever remember country's most legendary pair. Country music in the late 1960s was already packed with stars, but nothing prepared Nashville for what would happen when Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn crossed paths. Both were already carving out their own lanes. Conway had shocked the industry by walking away from his rock and roll stardom to reinvent himself as a country artist. Critics thought it was career suicide, but by 1968, he had already topped the country charts with Next in Line and Hello Darlin'. Loretta had been fighting tooth and nail to be heard in a male-dominated business. She had grown up poor in Butcher Hollow, Kentucky, married at 15, and dragged herself into stardom on sheer grit and authenticity. By the time Conway switched genres, Loretta was already a powerhouse with fearless songs about love, betrayal, and survival. Their first meeting wasn't at an award show or a star-studded Nashville party. It happened quietly backstage on tour, far away from the cameras. Loretta had just finished a set when she heard a voice behind her say, "You sing like someone who means every word." She turned to find Conway Twitty, and the two struck up a conversation that would last for over an hour. Instead of small talk, they dove into life on the road, record deals, and the struggles of being taken seriously as artists. For Loretta, who had spent years battling condescension from male colleagues, Conway's respect struck her deeply. He didn't talk down to her. He didn't see her as a girl singer. He saw her as his equal. That moment built the foundation of a partnership that would soon change country music forever. It didn't take long for the idea of recording together to surface. Loretta had sung duets before, but nothing had ever really caught fire. Conway had never recorded a true duet album, but he was curious. In 1971, they stepped into the studio together for the first time, recording After the Fire Is Gone. The result? A song so powerful, it immediately hit #1 and won them a Grammy. This wasn't just another duet. This was something different. Fans didn't just hear two voices harmonizing, they heard passion, trust, and a raw connection that felt almost too real. Country music had seen great singers before, but never a man and woman who sounded like they were living the songs they sang. From that moment on, Conway and Loretta weren't just two solo artists. They became a phenomenon. Audiences called them the perfect pair, and everywhere they went, fans couldn't stop asking the same question. Were they really just duet partners, or was there something more? Once After the Fire Is Gone exploded, there was no stopping them. In 1973, they dropped Louisiana Woman, Mississippi Man, a song that painted a vivid picture of two lovers separated by a river, but determined to bridge the distance no matter what stood in their way. The duet didn't just climb the charts, it became an anthem. Fans swore the passion they heard in those verses couldn't be faked. By the time the duo released Feelin's in 1975, the speculation had grown louder. The tenderness in the lyrics and the way Conway and Loretta delivered every line left audiences whispering. Were they singing about someone else, or were they singing about each other? On stage, the rumors only grew. Their concerts became more than just performances. They were spectacles of chemistry. They weren't simply trading lines. They were locked in a rhythm that made audiences believe they were living the songs in real time. For 4 straight years, from 1972 to 1975, they packed venues across the country, headlining together in a way few male-female duos ever had. Fans drove for hours, bought tickets months in advance, and waited just to see the pair that had become country music's most talked-about phenomenon. And while Conway and Loretta racked up CMA awards, ACM trophies, and even multiple American Music Awards for Favorite Duo, the gossip columnists were racking up headlines of their own. Every time the two walked into an award show together, the cameras lingered. Every time they shared a laugh backstage, whispers spread. Then came As Soon As I Hang Up the Phone in 1974, a track where Loretta plays a heartbroken woman on a phone call, and Conway delivers calm, devastating words on the other end. It was so raw, so convincing, that listeners swore they weren't acting. Fans argued that no two people could perform a breakup song like that without having lived it. For Conway and Loretta, though, the growing spotlight wasn't just about the hits. It was about the firestorm of speculation that followed them everywhere. They laughed it off in interviews. Loretta joked, "I've already got one husband to deal with," while Conway shrugged and said, "We just make good music together." But their smiles never silenced the whispers. If anything, those offhand answers fueled the fascination, because while they denied being more than friends, they never denied how close they really were. By the mid-1970s, their reputation as the perfect pair was cemented. But perfection comes at a price. The more success they had, the more people began to wonder, was their partnership built only on music, or was there something they weren't telling the world? And as their fame grew, so did the cracks in their personal lives, cracks that would make the rumors impossible to ignore. Behind the curtain of awards, sold-out tours, and chart-topping hits, Conway and Loretta's personal lives were far from simple. Both were married, both had children, and both carried the weight of reputations they couldn't afford to lose. Conway's romantic history was complicated. 4 marriages, 3 different women, and a lifetime of stories that followed him wherever he went. His longest marriage, to Temple Mickey Medley, was full of love but also strain. They divorced, remarried, and divorced again, the cycle of distance and reconciliation reflecting the chaos of his touring schedule. Later, Conway married his secretary, Dolores Henry, who stayed with him until his final days. Through it all, Conway kept his private life guarded, rarely giving the public more than a glimpse. Loretta's story couldn't have been more different yet, just as stormy. She had married Oliver Doolittle Lynn at just 15 years old, raising 6 children while trying to carve out a career in one of the toughest industries imaginable. Their marriage was passionate, but filled with hardships. Loretta's songs about cheating men, jealous wives, and survival weren't just clever lyrics, they were reflections of her reality. Doolittle had his flaws, from heavy drinking to infidelity, but Loretta stayed, channeling her pain into music that spoke directly to women everywhere. When fans heard her sing about philandering husbands or stubborn wives, they knew she wasn't making it up. She was living it. And so, when Conway entered her orbit, fans couldn't help but notice the contrast. Here was a man who treated Loretta as an equal, someone who respected her talent and gave her the space to shine. For a woman who had fought all her life to be heard above the noise, Conway's presence must have felt like a breath of fresh air. That dynamic played out in their duets. He never overshadowed her, never diminished her voice, instead he lifted her up. On stage, he looked at her like every lyric mattered. To audiences, it looked like love. But the problem was obvious. Both were tied down by families and obligations. Conway had children who adored him. Loretta had a husband who, for all his flaws, had been by her side since she was a teenager. To cross the line into romance would mean scandal, heartbreak, and destruction of everything they'd built. Still, that didn't stop the speculation. Reporters asked bluntly in interviews if they were more than friends. Fans whispered about the way Conway brushed Loretta's arm or the way she smiled back at him. They denied it every time, but the denials only added fuel. The truth was this: their marriages were messy, their lives complicated, and their bond undeniable. And when two people that close keep telling the world, "We're just friends," it only makes people believe the opposite. The tension between their personal commitments and their undeniable chemistry kept the rumor mill spinning for decades. And soon, their carefully balanced partnership would face its biggest test yet. Because when Conway and Loretta suddenly stopped recording together, fans were convinced the truth had finally come out. By the late 1970s, Conway and Loretta had become so inseparable in the public eye that fans almost forgot they were solo artists too. For nearly a decade, their names were linked as if they were one act. Every time Conway walked onto a stage without Loretta, fans shouted for her. Every time Loretta released an album on her own, interviewers asked when Conway would join her again. But then, suddenly, the flow of duets stopped. No new albums, no fresh duets on the radio. Their tours together ended. To the fans, it felt like a breakup, even if it wasn't romantic. Almost immediately, whispers of trouble began to circulate. Nashville insiders claimed there had been an argument. Some said over which songs to record, others insisted it was about money, and a few even suggested jealousy had gotten in the way. One rumor painted a dramatic picture of Conway storming out of a rehearsal after a heated disagreement. Another story suggested Loretta had grown frustrated with being defined by the duo, wanting to remind the world she was still a solo superstar. The truth, none of these rumors were ever confirmed, but they didn't have to be. In the absence of answers, speculation thrived. Behind the scenes, the reality was far less sensational. Both Conway and Loretta were exhausted. The constant touring, the pressure of always performing at the highest level, and the expectations of being country's perfect pair had taken a toll. Conway wanted to focus on cementing his solo career, chasing #1 hits on his own. Loretta had built her brand as a fearless voice for women, and she needed space to pursue projects that reflected her individuality. Their decision to step back was practical, not dramatic. But that's not how the fans saw it. For years, people had believed there was something deeper than friendship holding them together. So when the duets stopped, many assumed the opposite, that whatever was between them had soured. The gossip columns wrote of a secret rift. Some fans went further, speculating that they'd been romantically involved and had ended things badly. The more Conway and Loretta avoided the topic, the more convinced people became that they were hiding something. In truth, their bond never broke. Even while focusing on solo work, they continued to see each other at industry events, greeting each other with the kind of warmth that only comes from years of trust. When they crossed paths backstage at award shows, they hugged like family. And yet the distance on stage created a void. Fans felt betrayed, as if something precious had been taken from them. Their absence together made their presence together seem even more legendary. By the mid-1980s, the pair reunited for a few projects, reminding everyone that their chemistry hadn't faded. The harmonies were still smooth, the connection still undeniable. But their time apart had already planted a seed in the public imagination, that maybe, just maybe, the perfect duo wasn't quite as perfect behind closed doors. And as Conway's health began to decline in the years that followed, that question, the one fans had asked since the beginning, lingered louder than ever. What was the true nature of his bond with Loretta Lynn? To understand why Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn connected on such a deep level, you first have to understand where they came from. Their backgrounds couldn't have been more different, yet both were marked by hardship, determination, and an unshakable will to rise above the odds. Conway Twitty, born Harold Lloyd Jenkins in 1933, grew up along the Mississippi River in Friars Point before his family moved to Helena, Arkansas. He was just a boy when he started performing on local radio and formed his first band, the Phillips County Ramblers, at only 12 years old. By the time most kids were worrying about schoolwork, Conway was fronting live shows. In the late 1950s, under his new stage name, picked from a map combining Conway, Arkansas and Twitty, Texas, he shot to international stardom with It's Only Make Believe. That single sold millions and made him a household name almost overnight. But success in rock and roll left him restless. Conway wanted something more than screaming crowds and slick records. He wanted authenticity, and for him that meant country music. When Conway switched genres in the mid-1960s, many thought he was finished. Disc jockeys refused to play his early country records, dismissing him as a rock singer trying to cash in. But Conway pushed forward, and by 1968, he had silenced every critic with hits like Next in Line and Hello Darlin'. He became one of country's most consistent hitmakers, eventually earning more #1 songs on the country charts than any artist before him. Still, behind the smooth voice and commanding presence, Conway carried loneliness and turmoil. Multiple marriages, long stretches on the road, and the relentless pressure of fame took their toll. His personal life was complicated, but he poured all of that emotion into his music. Loretta Lynn's story, by contrast, began in the Appalachian coal country of Butcher Hollow, Kentucky. Born Loretta Webb in 1932, She was one of 8 children in a family struggling to survive. Her father was a coal miner and subsistence farmer, and the family lived with little more than the bare essentials. At just 15, Loretta married Oliver Doolittle Lynn, a union that would test her in ways most couldn't imagine. By her early 20s, she was raising 6 children while scraping together a living, yet she still found the strength to write songs. A $17 guitar and sheer willpower launched her career. Her lyrics weren't polished stories from outsiders. They were raw reflections of her own life. Songs like You Ain't Woman Enough and Fist City captured the rage and resilience of a woman dealing with infidelity and heartbreak at home. The Pill tackled birth control at a time when such topics were taboo, earning both bans from radio stations and loyalty from female fans who finally felt heard. Loretta wasn't just singing country songs, she was reshaping the genre itself. So when Conway and Loretta finally met, their shared scars became a bond. Both had been underestimated, both had clawed their way to the top, and both understood what it meant to fight for respect. That shared resilience bled into their duets. Fans weren't just hearing harmonies, they were hearing 2 survivors telling stories together. And that authenticity, the sense that these 2 had lived through every lyric, was what made them unstoppable as a duo. But even as their connection deepened and their music changed the genre, Conway's health was beginning to falter. And when tragedy struck in the early 1990s, Loretta would be standing only steps away from him at the most unthinkable moment. By the early 1990s, Conway Twitty was a legend. He had achieved more #1 country hits than anyone before him, and his name was etched into the history of American music. Yet the man behind the stage lights was no longer the tireless performer fans thought they knew. Years of non-stop touring, sleepless nights on buses, and the pressures of maintaining superstar status had worn him down. Those closest to Conway noticed the change first. He began suffering dizzy spells, fatigue, and high blood pressure. But Conway pushed through, determined not to disappoint the fans who had carried him for decades. His philosophy was simple. As long as people kept buying tickets, he would keep singing. But his body had other plans. In early June of 1993, Conway was performing in Branson, Missouri, when he suddenly fell ill. After the show, he boarded his tour bus to head toward Nashville for the annual Fan Fair, a celebration where thousands of fans gathered each year to meet their idols. On that ride, Conway was struck by severe stomach pain. At first he brushed it off, assuming it was food-related, but the pain intensified quickly, and before long, he collapsed. The bus rushed him to Cox South Hospital in Springfield, Missouri, where doctors discovered a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm. Emergency surgery was attempted, but the odds were grim. And here's where fate intervened in a way no one could have scripted. Loretta Lynn just happened to be in that very same hospital. She was there by her husband Doolittle's side, as he battled his own severe health issues related to heart complications and diabetes. In a bizarre twist of destiny, Loretta found herself running between 2 rooms, one where her husband lay gravely ill, and another where her dearest friend and singing partner fought for his life. Loretta later admitted it was one of the most heartbreaking nights of her life. She sat with Conway's wife, Dolores, offering comfort even as she herself was crumbling inside. She held Conway's hand, urging him not to give up, telling him, "You love to sing, you're going to be all right." For hours, she bounced between her husband's side and Conway's, torn between the 2 most important men in her life at that moment. Then came the moment no fan ever wanted to imagine. As Loretta entered Doolittle's room, news broke down the hallway. Conway had passed away in the early hours of June 5, 1993. He was just 59 years old. To this day, fans struggle to believe the coincidence. Out of all the hospitals in America, Loretta Lynn was in the same building at the exact moment Conway Twitty's life ended. Some call it fate, others call it cruel irony. But one thing is certain, it bound their story together forever. Loretta sat quietly at Conway's funeral days later, refusing to speak publicly, but her grief was visible to everyone who knew her. Friends said she looked shattered, as though she had lost more than just a colleague. She had lost a part of herself. But even then, the whispers didn't stop. In fact, they grew louder. Because if Loretta Lynn was at Conway Twitty's side during his last moments, what did that really mean about the bond they shared? For most of his career, Conway Twitty avoided gossip like it was poison. He rarely gave interviews that strayed beyond his music, and when questions about Loretta Lynn came up, he always steered the conversation back to the songs. To Conway, privacy was sacred. But as the years went on, the rumors about him and Loretta refused to fade. Fans weren't satisfied with vague denials. Reporters weren't content with polite brush-offs. And by the early 1990s, the speculation had become so entrenched in his legacy that Conway knew he could no longer ignore it. In one of his last interviews before his passing, Conway was asked directly, once again about his relationship with Loretta Lynn. For the first time, he didn't sidestep the question. Instead, he leaned back, smiled, and chose to speak with honesty. "People have always talked," he said softly. "Let 'em." But then he went further than he ever had before. "Loretta and I are close, and that's no secret. You can hear it in our music. But people need to understand there's more than one kind of love. Ours wasn't a relationship. It was a friendship built on music and trust." The interviewer sat stunned. Conway had never given the public such a candid glimpse into the nature of their bond. He wasn't defensive, and he wasn't trying to spin the story. He was calm, reflective, and deliberate. "We never crossed any lines," he added. "What we had was too important to ruin. I respected her too much to ever put her in that kind of position, and she respected me the same way." To many, this was a shocking admission, not because it confirmed romance, but because it confirmed the opposite. Fans who had spent decades convinced there was a hidden affair were left to reconsider everything they thought they knew. Conway acknowledged that their performances sometimes gave the impression of intimacy, but he explained why. "We were performers. To make people feel it, we had to live it on stage. That's what made the songs real." He even admitted something more vulnerable. That he loved Loretta, but not in the way people assumed. He loved her strength, her fire, her refusal to bend to industry pressure. He loved her voice, the honesty in her music, and the way she carried herself through battles that would have broken most people. "I think the world wanted us to be a love story," Conway confessed. "But the truth is, we were something different. We were a partnership story." For fans, it was bittersweet. Some were disappointed, clinging to the fantasy that their favorite duo had lived out the romance in their songs. Others found it deeply moving, realizing that their bond didn't need scandal to be legendary. What Conway revealed was not weakness, but strength, a respect so deep it transcended romance. And with those words, Conway closed the chapter on decades of rumors. He hadn't spoken to shock anyone. He had spoken to set the record straight before it was too late. When Conway Twitty passed away in June 1993, the country music world didn't just lose a superstar. It lost half of a duo that had come to symbolize trust, chemistry, and the magic of collaboration. The silence that followed his death was deafening. Radio stations across America played "Hello Darlin'," "Louisiana Woman," "Mississippi Man," and "After the Fire Is Gone" on repeat, as if to fill the void he had left behind. At his funeral, Loretta Lynn sat quietly with her family, too devastated to speak. Friends later said she looked shattered, like someone who had lost a piece of herself. And in a way, she had. For more than 20 years, Conway hadn't just been a duet partner. He had been her confidant, her equal, and the one person on stage who allowed her to be both strong and vulnerable without fear. In the years that followed, Loretta carried on with her career, but she never shied away from speaking about Conway. Whenever she was asked about her proudest moments, she often pointed back to the songs they made together. She called him her singing partner, a title that might sound simple, but carried a lifetime of weight. Even as she racked up awards, honors, and the respect of generations, Loretta made it clear that the music she shared with Conway was special in a way that nothing else could ever replace. Fans, too, never let the story fade. Decades later, people still debate the nature of their bond. Some hold tight to the belief that their duets revealed a love story too real to be denied. Others take Conway's final words as the truth, that their connection was built not on romance, but on something even rarer: unwavering respect. What most agree on, however, is that Conway and Loretta's music remains unmatched. Their harmonies didn't just sound good, they felt alive. Every song carried an emotional truth that still resonates today, long after both stars have left the stage. And maybe that's the real lesson in their story. It was never about whether they were lovers or just friends. It was about two artists who found in each other a creative partner they could trust completely. In an industry full of competition and ego, that kind of bond is almost impossible to find. For Conway and Loretta, it wasn't scandal that made them unforgettable. It was the purity of their partnership. Looking back, Conway once said he thought the world wanted them to be a love story. But perhaps the truth is even more powerful. They were a proof of concept that a man and a woman could share the stage, pour their hearts into music, and give the world something timeless without ever crossing the lines people assumed they did. And so, their legacy lives on. Every time a fan hears "As Soon As I Hang Up the Phone" or "Lead Me On," they're reminded not just of two voices, but of two lives that found harmony in ways few ever will. Conway may be gone, and Loretta may have lived her later years without him, but their voices together remain immortal. That's the truth Conway left behind, and for fans of country music, it's more than enough. If you enjoyed this story about Conway and Loretta's legendary partnership, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what your favorite duet of theirs was. And if you want more stories about country music's greatest legends, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.